the events that are unfolding in Bangladesh, and there's no one better equipped to talk to us on this evolving, very important issue than Professor Imtiaz Ahmed. Professor Imtiaz Ahmed has been head of International Relations Department, Dhaka University, a brilliant student, first class first, BA in International Relations, Masters Australian National University on United States and Pakistan, I think United States and Bangladesh evolving relationship, PhD Carleton, Ottawa, on, as you have just heard, state and foreign policy, India and South Asia. He has made enormous contribution to the literature of foreign policy, international relations the last few years. Very well traveled, well spoken, and particularly focused on South Asia. Today he's going to talk to us about what's happening in Bangladesh and give us a bit of an insight into the somewhat very complex political evolution in Bangladesh. In our so-called Friday prayers in the mornings, we have discussed Bangladesh a couple of times. The last couple of occasions, the chairs meetings, chairs interactions with the scholars, and today we are getting it from the horse's mouth. Professor.
Thank you, Firoy. Well, I haven't prepared anything, in fact. So what I will do is try to say what Dr. Iftikhar Chaudhary has already pointed out about the current state of politics, but within a framework. I think it's important to have a framework in order to understand why in some of these developing countries we end up having what we are having. And I don't think Bangladesh is an exception in this context. Whole of South Asia, as you know, even I would say India has its own problems with elections and everything. But let me give you a theoretical framework, something that I'm working now. You see, we, the adults particularly, the seniors, are familiar with one dystopia, and that's the Orwellian world. I'm sure some of you have read 1984, George Orwell, way back in 1949. I wrote an absolutely fascinating piece called 1984, where he indicated that the big brother is watching you, and beware the big brother. The state. Now, a lot of people thought that Orwell was getting this idea from Stalin and Stalin authoritarianism. In his diary later on, he made very clear that it's nothing to do with Soviet Union. He got the entire idea of Big Brother watching you while working in the BBC during the war period. It was in BBC he got this idea that the Big Brother is watching you. Now, throughout the whole generations, us, we have evolved through that, and we live with that dystopia. And the state has actually gone to an extent where I'm sure some of you are familiar that if you now walk in the London streets, you could be actually photographed 400 times per day. So the big brother is really watching you. Now that's the state, and it has machineries, it has evolved its own security apparatus, the intelligence agencies, the $1 trillion budget, and one can go on and on. And whether it's a developing state or developed state, the big brother is there. Now in 2009, 2010, another author comes up with another dystopia. And in queue with Orwell's 1984, calls his book 1Q84. And this is Murakami. Now, Haruki Murakami takes Orwell very seriously. Does not refer to 1984, it calls it QQ in Japanese. 9 is pronounced as Q, but by doing 1Q84, he made it endless. Now here Murakami is arguing that yes, the big brother is watching you, but terrifying another dystopia has come to live with us, and that is little people are watching you. So you have the big brother, and you have the little people. And the little people can create menace to an extent that even the big brother cannot get a sense of that. And you can immediately see, in fact, symbolically, so to say, the non-state terrorist creeping in fact, and making a mess of the world. And we have seen little people in Mumbai incident, in Islamabad Radisson incident, and also in Bangladesh. So you have little people everywhere, in fact, so to say. Now this is the two dystopias, and when I come to Bangladesh, I think both the dystopias are with us when we refer to any country, but more importantly, developing countries. And I think South Asia is a particular example where you can see the big brother and the little people both making a mess of the things. Now, Bangladesh, as we speak, is in the midst of a contradiction. It's an interesting contradiction. Economically, there are all positive signs. You have a growth rate for years. You have a Human Development Index much better than even in India, Pakistan, and other countries. And Amartya Sen would go on, telling these stories in Calcutta, in Delhi, about how remarkable Bangladesh has done with this HDI. You have, I can give you some figures in terms of reducing poverty. It's impressive, 26.4 percentage points in the past 2 decades. Even the share of the African economy in GDP has declined from 33% in 1980 to 20% in 2012. So you have all the very broad, promising signals when we talk about the economic dimension. In RMG sector, Bangladesh is already number 2, next to China. You have remittances coming from the Middle East diaspora in a remarkably big figure. So you have a kind of a strength, which a lot of people would say Bangladesh is on its way to become an MIC. Now, the contradiction is politically, you are in a total mess. And so the people say, how can a country which economically is doing so well, politically is doing so bad? And it comes to every 5 years, at the end of 5 years, mostly, you end up with violence. Now, here one has to see how democracy got reproduced. Well, in most of South Asia, I would say, but in Bangladesh particularly, what you have when we talk about democracy, you have an electoral democracy. People would use the concept of electoral authoritarianism also. So it is through elections that you produce democracy. There's hardly democracy within the parties. And this is not the exception. People, critics, even my friends, Indian critics, would say that Pranab Mukherjee was made the president so that the family can, particularly in the Congress, that thing can get reproduced. So lack of democracy you have also in Congress party even after 60 years. So Bangladesh too, Pakistan the same, Rajapaksa, Sri Lanka, you name any countries in South Asia, you have the same kind of structure. Now in Bangladesh, the problem lies more with you have not one party which intends to reproduce a kind of a kinship, but 2 parties, and I'm talking about BNP and Awami League. Both, in fact, lacks democracy within, although they champion the cause of democracy without, but at the same time, you have a kind of a kinship, and you have a circle after circle. In Bangla, we say chamchas, the sycophants, who will try to say, without this charismatic leadership or family, you can't, the Bangladesh or South Asia would, go down the drain, etc., etc. This is a South Asian way of looking at democracy, etc. So you build on that, in fact. Historically, it doesn't make any sense, in fact. If you look at the entire civilization history of South Asia, kinship has always been challenged, in fact, to the point that you had more outsiders actually ruling South Asia than insiders. The indigenous rulers, in fact, in the context of whole of South Asia, the Guptas, the Chandragupta Mauryas, were the first ones, 130 years again, not more than that. But if you take other big ones, all were from outsides. You had the Mughals, the Chagatai Turks, again ruling for 320 years. The Sultan dynasty, 350 years. Then the British, 200 years. So you have, over 900 to 1,000 years outsiders actually. So as Homo politicus, we are really bad. Our strength lies in culture, and Bangladesh is no exception for that matter. Now, what has happened this time, I want to focus more on this time. The idea that Bangladesh, after 71, right after 71, again reasons for kinship, and by the time of 74, I think, yes, it was 74, the Bakshar was, or January 75, let's put it
75.
January 75, towards the end of 74, things began to go in a direction where democracy was challenged, and Awami League then, went for a one-party democracy, and that was the end of Awami League 2006. So it was very easy for the military to come in and get into politics. But since then, in fact, throughout...
That was to have been a Yugoslav model, is that right? Or
a Tanzanian model, you name it, well, they use the word Tanzanian of Nyerere's model and all, but it doesn't make any sense, in fact. But it's mainly to do with the kinship. And then the point that Mujib himself declared as lifelong president, So that kills the democracy. There were dissenters, there were serious dissenters within Awami League, in fact, and people also forget that the leader, well, the military were there, but the leadership included key Awami Leaguers, including Khandat Mushtaq, who was an Awami Leaguer who became the president after the brutal killing of Mujib and his family. Now, that structure somehow got after a kind of a political campaign, serious political campaign against Ershad, and in 1991, you really had a kind of serious agitation where the military had to roll back. And the reason for the rollback was, for the first time, both Awami League and BNP got together. When the civilians get together, or the civil political parties get together, it becomes very difficult for the military to get in. And throughout history, in Bangladesh history, it's always been the case that the military got in when there were division within the civil domain. So they could easily get in. So when AL and BNP got together, the military rolled back, but then things began, as I say, BNP wanted to reproduce its own power, not through democratic means. You hardly have democracy outside the election framework. There is no democracy within party structure, no transparency within the funds, how the funds are collected, who gets what, and that gets infected. You try to influence other structures as well. So the bureaucracy got infected as well. Promotion became very partisan. If you're close to the regime, you get promoted, and regime after regime, it really got down. In the days where, if the Kachodi were the bureaucrats, probably you had kind of expertise and the merit worked, but 2 generations after that, it's simply how much you are close to the party, and the bureaucrats also, the young bureaucrats also have learned the magic, to climb up the ladder. So they also know what to do. And the testimony of this can easily, you can make, empirically you can show this, because whenever a new regime comes, something like 300 becomes OSDs. Well, they call it office on special duty, but actually it's office on sleeping duty, and every term is 300, here and 300 there. So they sleep for 5 years, and because they're sleeping for 5 years, when the new regime comes, they wake up and they get higher promotion, in fact. And there are retired people, in fact, in different areas, because they were made OSDs or thrown out for some reason. So you get into a kind of a structure where you have a political bureaucratic nexus, but then you also have a political bureaucratic business nexus. You are in a stage, particularly in Bangladesh, the Marxists would say primitive accumulation. So you try to get into the business by getting extra privileges or getting contracts, underhand dealings, getting loans which are not in the right direction. So this primitive accumulation also allows the business, in fact, to become very partisan. So if you are with A, then you get one kind of business deals, and because you are with A, when the B comes to power, the B uses its own business community. So the business community also got, and they got into, they benefited a lot, both this. And then I will tell you later, little later, that development has some positive element to understanding of where Bangladesh is going. Now, so you have a serious political bureaucratic business nexus, in fact, and that structure somehow makes people cling to one side, because if you are not with that side, you lose everything when that party is not in power. And so you don't want to lose everything, so you want to remain in some way. So you try to champion the cause of A or champion the cause of the B in all kinds of ways that you think. Now what happened last time, or a little bit early, let me point out that in 91 the military rolled back and you had democratic elections, but by 96 again agitation, because opposition thought that the election could be manipulated. So they came up with the idea called caretaker government. Not through dialogues. It was done through an election, which was 12th February election, 96. BNP went ahead with the election. Arguing that I need 2/3 majority to pass the bill. AL boycotted the election, and after that they got the bill through, and then they called the election. I think they were in power, a month or two at the most. And since then, in fact, people thought that, okay, now that we have caretaker government, but that would resolve the problem. But it did not, because since you don't have internal democracy, you keep on thinking that how can you reproduce your power. So when BNP came to power, they started manipulating the caretaker government system. Now, how do you manipulate that? Well, the idea of the caretaker government, the original caretaker government, was that you make the immediate former Chief Justice the Chief Advisor. Now, in Bangladesh, the Chief Advisor or CEO is everything, in fact. The Prime Minister is all in all. You can you can cancel anyone, so it's absolutely power more than one can handle. So what happened with that, Awami League objected to that, and by 2007 it went to a point where literally they were fighting on the streets, that the caretaker government, the military had no other choice but to intervene. But they intervened in an interesting way. They did not, in fact, they managed to have a civilian input in the kind of intervention that they had, and what is known as 111 caretaker government, and Iftikhar Chaudhry was also a member of the cabinet that was formed. And the idea was that you try to cool down things and at least resolve some of the issues. One critical issue was the voter list, which was really in disgusting, kind of the figures were absolutely horrible. The 1 million fake voters, fake voters. So here the civilian government, military-backed civilian government said, okay, we'll fix this, and they did, in fact, with the help of the military. We had one of the countries which made this national ID the quickest, and even the UN was quite full of praises. So you have a photo, national ID, and then 1 million fake voters were thrown out. So you have a system where the election could be fair. Because over the years, the democratic government or the political government contributed in making the figure of fake voters higher. So each government tried to put more of its people so that they can influence the election. Now that got out. So 2 years caretaker government, but I think if I have to say 1 or 2 major mistakes they made. One mistake was, I think in a month or so, they came up and said that we are going to stay for 2 years. Now in political science you never do that. Once the power you get, the moment you say you're going to hand over the power, you're finished. So that what I think Mao Zedong wanted to say, that political power goes out of a barrel of a gun. So that remained. But the moment you say that I want to give away the gun, then there's no point. So I think one of the major mistakes was to say that we are going to stay only for 2 years. In that way, immediately, the other missionaries knew that, well, they are for 2 years, so far better if we can invest our whatever energy we have with A and B, and more with A, because A has more chance to win the election. So the entire structure went. That was one of the mistakes I would argue was a critical one. And the second one was to empower the two key leaders, Sheikh Hasina and Khalid by making them different, by making they were arrested, but they were put into a special kind of houses, and you empowered them by doing that they are different from the rest of the citizens. In democracy you can't do that, but you did it in fact for whatever reasons. I will say that was also one of the mistakes, because there were inside the political parties people actually were trying to reform. There were enormous criticism. Some of the members of AL and BNP would say that we were openly being critical of our leaders, but the empowering that the Kerala government did made us difficult, because it showed that they were indispensable, and this really played in a big way. And as we leave, in fact, we are actually, I would say, quote unquote, suffering from that kind of empowerment. Now, what has happened this time, when the ruling party, Awami League, when it came to power, it got rid of the caretaker system, arguing now that it is in power, that undemocratic structure cannot reproduce democracy. So we will hold elections, in a purely Westminster system, that the ruling party will hold elections, etc., by strengthening the election commission, which has not happened though. And so you are back to square one, where the opposition comes and makes a case that we are going to boycott. Now, you have a serious polarized situation, an eye for eye, and this is where the little people comes in, the thing that I was mentioning in the beginning. For a while, and I must very quickly say that the ruling party wanted 2 things. Not only to go alone in the election, but also to hold a war crime trial, which was a demand of the young generation, and also a promise in the election. But they tried to do it in a way to influence what I would say the partisan interest, and then maybe during question and answer I try to explain that in bigger details. Now, work and trial, whatever it is, somehow BNP found it difficult to go by the way it was done, because it was targeted against the Jamaat Islam, which was an alliance, still in alliance with BNP. Now, as we speak, there have been 3 verdicts already. The first verdict was almost non-even, because the person was in absentia, is not in town. No one knows where he is, but he was given a death sentence. The second verdict, Mullah's verdict, is a critical one, where he was not given a death sentence but given a life imprisonment, and that really provoked kind of an agitation by the young people, thinking that there must have been a tacit alliance between Awami League and Jamaat. Now, why that is so, this one has to understand. Is historically Jamaat has never boycotted elections. It has always participated in election, and because that's the only way it can reproduce its power or a kind of legitimacy. So the fear of BNP is this, that if there is a tacit alliance between Jamaat and Awami League, and Jamaat goes to the election, then BNP's boycott would become meaningless, and Jamaat would end up as the opposition. And that is the fear that the BNP has, and for that reason BNP is not letting Jamaat go. Even there were some kind of tension between Jamaat and BNP at one point of time. BNP was critical to some extent of some of the steps that Jamaat was taking, but still they did not let the alliance go, fearing that if they let the Jamaat go, Jamaat could end up participating in the election, and that would leave BNP out. So as we speak, in fact, and I haven't, maybe in Q&A we can go for some of the details, but as I speak today, we are in a stage of a serious confrontation. But my argument here is we are going to have a soft landing rather than a hard landing. Hard landing, I mean a military takeover. I'm betting on that there will be a compromise at one point in time. And why? 4 points. One is the violence itself is a deterrence. The level of violence that we have seen last month, with 112 people dead, shows that the opposition is capable of really creating a kind of chaos which would be unacceptable. So that violence itself would be a kind of a deterrence and would actually be taken very seriously, and then I think that would play an important role in the kind of compromise that I'm talking about. The second is the international pressure, which has already started. There's hardly investment is not coming, no serious visits. There's every time any international, whether it's USA or the Union, would be talking about elections, etc. There's also third one. There's also regional pressure. My argument would be even Delhi is very nervous about what is happening in Bangladesh, and they have openly pointed out that we want all parties participate in election, and they made it very clear that we don't want an election which just with AL, whatever reason that AL wants. So this all-party election is something that even Delhi, I think, and there are good reasons for that. And one good reason, very quickly, is Delhi is looking for a long-term win-win kind of a relationship, and that has to do with the 1 billion loan that they have offered. And not only that, if they want Northeast kind of relationship, the transit and transshipment, you can't have a 5-year relationship and go up and down. You need a long-term relationship, and I believe Bangladesh is in a footing of having a long-term relationship, irrespective of whatever regimes will be there in Dhaka. So I think, since Delhi is looking for a long-term relationship, they would look for an all-participatory elections. And the last one is the business community. The business community during Iftiwai's time, they suffered. The military, for whatever reason, in fact, mainly corruption, but they suffered to the point that the big ones actually stayed out the whole 2 years. In fact, they were in Canada or in States, roaming around. In fact, they have enough money to roam around in any way. So what they, so my bet is this time they would not allow things to go to a hand where a serious military takeover or serious military intervention would put them in a kind of a situation that they have to run again because they are already in. And here I just want to end by saying that 52% of the member of parliaments out of 300 are directly business people, businessmen. And out of that 52%, 30% are RNG sector, directly involved in RNG sector. But if you, and these are self-professed businessmen, you know, when they write that I'm a businessman. But if you take the indirect links, the critics say that it's over 70% are business people in the member of parliament. So that tells you that since the, you know, because of globalization, the structures, and you already have you know 20 billion plus RNG market, etc. You are one of the big players now, and so there's no reason why they would want a kind of confrontation where they will be in a serious mess. So these four elements, I think, would be enough to make a kind of a soft landing. Now the question is when. My argument is opposition BNP would want it in November, not now, or the end of the tenure, because in that way you can have a victory march. And that has been the tradition, that you show that it is because of me, this government fell down, and so, you know, here I am, the new face. Awami League, the ruling party, will do better if it can resolve this by 30th April, because that would give 6 months time. And you can't have a victory march for 6 months. So I'm betting on this, that that it's the period which is very important. Now, the only thing where the ruling party may not be interested to go for a compromise, and that would mean that if the ruling party thinks that it's going to lose the election, despite the Shahbag movement, the youth movement for, you know, the work and pride, etc., if they still think, if their survey shows that they're going to lose the election, then they will not go for a compromise. The idea is that better to give to a kind of a military, you know, 111 square, you know, a return of caretaker, military-backed caretaker government. Better to give to that kind of a government rather than to BNP, because an elected, normally elected BNP regime would be more harsh, more tough on Awami League, and would take the revenge. And so one has to see if that is the case. If there's no compromise, that means Awami League is pretty sure that they're going to lose the election. I'll stop here. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Imtiaz. Very good and excellent analysis. I'll